Hi, I'm Scott Campbell with Solve 3D.
And I'm Brad Ashley, and this is our fourth video. This will be using that model that we trained in video 3 and running it against new or additional imagery that we want to find the same items and label them.
Yeah, Brad, before we get into this, I was watching a recap of our last video and a couple of questions came to mind, and I'm sure folks watching this video may have the same questions. So my first question is, so when I'm creating the models, training the models, what's my limit? How many can I create?
Yeah, so the answer to that is as many as you'd like. There's no limit to the amount of models that you want to create and save. And you can also start to mix and match models. So again, if you want to have multiple classes within models, you can build models that have several classes, or you can have individual models based on each item of interest.
Okay, so that's pretty cool. No limit to the number of models I can create using this tool. But now, where is that model? Where does it sit? Who can use it? Who can I share it with?
Yeah, so since you're the creator of that model, you're also the owner and the only one who can access it to begin with. So you save that model, and then really it comes down to whoever you want to share that model with. So you can send that out and share it with others within your organization or others external to your organization. But remember that anyone who would have to have access to it would also have to have a license to the Solve Engine object classification module. So although you might be able to share it with others or send it out to others, they would also have to have a license to that module specifically to be able to run it.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, and that's pretty cool. So now let's get down to brass tacks here. So I've got this train model that I've created. How do I use it?
Yeah, so let's walk through that process. To begin, what we have to do is load that additional imagery. So we've now done the training and the modeling, we did the labeling, but what we have to do next is load those data files that we're interested in running that model against. So we just loaded all those data tiles. And the first thing we have to do is go into the aerial classification tool again and use that run classification tool. In here, we're going to be asked to set a classification score. I'm using 0.5 as my classification score. And then we're going to be asked what model we want to use for the training, as well as which training data we want to use as the to run against that model. So here we've set that. You can now see the little red progress bar started at the top, and we're off and running.
So while that's running, I got a quick question for you, or a comment, I guess, on classification score. So my understanding is you pick the middle of the road there, right in the middle between 0 and 1. If you pick, the higher the number you pick, the closer to 1 that you pick, the higher number of false negatives you're going to get. In other words, it's going to miss objects. But the lower you set the score, the more likely it is that the tool is going to pick up false positives. In other words, it's going to say a shoe is a car, or a car is a house, or something like that. So you need to start in the middle like you did here, and then depending on your results, either nudge that score higher or nudge that score lower.
Yeah, it really comes down to, again, because of the way that our tool's been designed, you can always add additional labels or remove them. We have both an add and a delete function. So if you find it easier to delete objects that are not truly the object that you were interested in, then you would want to set that low and potentially delete them. And then again, if you want to add those additional items that maybe the tool didn't find, you might want to use a high number, like you said, something 0.9 or above, and then you're going to miss those items. So once this progress bar hits 100, it turns off or disappears, the same as with the training model. And then what happens is it starts to do the import of those labels. So it's going through, running, and importing all of the labels that it's found while using that model. And so once that happens, you're going to see all of the vehicle labels and all of the paint markings. So just to give us a sense, when we trained, we had, I think, 86 vehicles, and we had 3 paint markings. Now we have 2,082 vehicles and 129 paint markings. And so you can see that we found a lot of vehicles and quite a few paint markings. If we now zoom in on the data, we can start to look and see how the model's acted. So here we can zoom in and we can see that we have a number of cars that have been located. We also have a couple paint spots that have been located in the parking spots. So it looks like it's done what we wanted it to do, and it's run well. Again, if we now wanted to delete or add any items, we could. But the next step here typically is to export the resulting labels out in a way that you can use them. So we have two export functions, the first of which is the export to 3DL file, which allows you to bring it back into the tool. And the other is the export to DXF option, which then allows you to bring it into Solid and Compass, take it into an Autodesk application or a GIS application. And in this case, I'm showing an example of me bringing those labels into Civil 3D and seeing how they look. And so, again, if you're creating some sort of byproduct, maybe a CAD model or a survey plan, you could use these as a really good starting point for, how many cars or how many paint marks there are.
This kind of points out a couple of key points for me anyway, as I think about this video. First one being is that if you've got a ton of data and processing is slow and you want to speed it up, you should take a look at what we've written in the documentation around not our minimum, but a recommended computing environment. And the big thing that'll jump out at you is increasing your GPU horsepower is going to increase your processing speed. There are other factors for sure, your SSD and your memory and all that kind of stuff, but GPU is really where it's at. The second key point that kind of comes to mind is back to that classification score. You're going to need to play with it. Start in the middle is our recommendation. Depending on your results, you may want to move it up, you may want to move it down. Again, it's just going to be one of those things that you're just going to have to do a little bit of trial and error until you zone in on the right number for you, your workflow, and the types of objects you're looking for, and your data sets. So what's next in our video series?
Yeah, so the next video is actually going to talk about how you can run some of these functions within the actual Solve engine workflow. And so we'll be going through and showing which tools can be run from the engine workflow side. And obviously that allows you to run it via command line.
Okay, Brad, well, I'll see you in that video then.